Hello, my name is Trey Johnston, and today I'll be discussing how to use 5 different pieces of shop equipment. First the table saw, then the bench grinder, drill press, radial arm saw, and a belt sander. But before we get started, I'd like to go over some general shop safety tips. At all times, it is required to wear safety glasses and or face shield when working in the shop. Second, if you have long hair that could cause a distraction, it must be pulled back. If you are wearing a long sleeve shirt, it must be tied or pulled above the elbows to avoid getting caught in the machines. And finally, it is a must to wear closed-toed shoes while working in the shop, as you may never know when something could fall on your foot. Here we have our table saw. The table saw is used for ripping and or cross-cutting material at an angle or on a bevel. As seen here, ripping a piece of wood goes with the grain, cross-cutting goes against the grain. The table saw is not designed to cut any curves in the materials. Now let's go over some different areas on the table saw. It is always important to locate the off switch and the on switch of the table saw. In an emergency, you would want to be able to shut the machine off quickly as possible to avoid any further injury. When turning on the machine, you will need a magnetic piece to engage the on switch. Once that is in place, you can then go ahead and turn on the machine. Before you work on any part of the table saw, either adjusting, setting up your work area, it is important to unplug the table saw. This just ensures that the table saw will not turn on. Here we have our safety guard. The safety guard must be in place at all times while the machine is on or being used. The safety guard can be raised and lowered as shown here. Installed on the safety guard is an anti-kickback mechanism, which is used when the piece of wood is being pushed through. Once the piece of wood has reached the anti-kickback, the piece of wood is more difficult to be able to come back and hit you. Remember, the safety guard must be in place at all times while using the table saw. Next we have the wheel up front that is used to raise and lower the saw blade. I'll show a demonstration on how to properly set the saw blade relative to the piece of wood.
The teeth of the saw should be adjusted so they extend above the workpiece between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. If the saw is adjusted lower, then this may overload with sawdust, slowing the cut and overheating the blade. If the blade projects too much through the workpiece, it will throw too much sawdust and be more likely to kick back.
Next, when cutting any piece of material, you will be using a rip fence here, or a miter gauge as shown here. Just like so. Never is it a good time to use the rip fence and the miter gauge at the same time. If you do, this may cause binding between the blade and the rip fence while you are pushing it with the miter gauge. When using the rip fence, remember this is using for ripping the piece of wood along the grain. If the piece is smaller than 3 inches, it is recommended to use a push stick as you are passing the blade, as shown here. If the piece is longer than 3 feet and wider than 2 feet, it is recommended to use a roller support and or another person. Keep in mind, if you are using other help, they are not to pull the material. They are just solely there to support the material as it is passing the blade. Next we have our miter gauge. Remember, we cannot use the miter gauge and the rip fence, so make sure to push the rip fence as far as you can to not cause any problems while using the miter gauge. Using the miter gauge is used to cross-cut a piece of wood against the grain, as shown here. Before I show a demonstration on how to use the table saw, there are a few other things I just want to make sure everyone is clear. When working with the table saw, it is never okay to reach past the blade to grab pieces of material that may be loose or in the way. If there is a piece of material that is stuck between the blade and the rip fence, just simply turn off the machine and wait for the blade to come to a complete stop before reaching in and grabbing the piece of material. Our next piece of equipment here is the bench grinder. The bench grinder is used to remove metal, sharpen tools, or even prep metal for welding. When using the bench grinder, it is a must to wear safety glasses and/or a face shield. Also, if the bench grinder has safety guards installed, make sure to keep those in place at all times. Before using the bench grinder, make sure that it is securely fastened to your work table. Next, using a combination end wrench, you will use it to adjust your table rest here to make sure that it is 1/8 of an inch away from your grinding wheel. On this grinder wheel, or bench grinder, you have a fine grinding wheel and a coarse grinding wheel. If the wheels are nicked, damaged, and can be repaired, you may use a honing tool to fix the surface of the wheel. When dressing the wheel, you will simply set the tool down on the rest here and run, as the machine is running, go back and forth until the grinding wheel becomes nice and square. Before you get started using the grinding wheel or making any adjustments, it is good to locate the on and off switch and make sure the machine is unplugged. Moving on to the operations of the bench grinder. When turning on the bench grinder for the first time, it is a must to stand off to the side and then turn on the machine. You never know if something may be wrong with the grinding wheel and could fly out and hit you. So it is a good idea to stand off to the side. Also, while working with the bench grinder, if your piece of metal is too small to hold in your hands, be sure to use some pliers to hold the metal.
Nice job staying up on the side.
Our next piece of equipment is the variable speed drill press. The drill press can be used to drill holes in wood and/or metal. You must obtain the instructor's permission before using the machine. Keep in mind, you must wear safety glasses and/or a face shield at all times. Also, you must wear short sleeve shirts and/or tightly fitted long sleeve shirts to avoid material getting caught into the drill press. Now that we've gone over the basics, let's view some of the components of the drill press. It is always important to locate the on and off switch. In case of an emergency, you can quickly hit the off switch to shut off the machine. Here we have our chuck key. The chuck key is used to remove and insert the drill bit. You must insert the chuck key back into the safety switch in order for the machine to turn back on. Here we have our spindle feed handle, which raises and lowers the drill bit. If your material is less than 12 inches, it must be secure to the tabletop to avoid binding and/or kickback when the machine is in use. You could use the vise, which is here on the table, to secure your material in place. When drilling metal, if the material becomes hot, it is a good idea to apply oil to the area that is being drilled. Once you're finished drilling and you have material left on the table, you must use a table brush, not an air hose, to remove those pieces. A few more things to keep in mind. It is a good idea to make sure your drill bit is properly sharpened. If you need assistance, please ask the instructor. Also, in general, smaller drill bits need a faster drilling speed, whereas larger drill bits need a slower drilling speed. If you need to adjust the drilling speed, please ask the instructors for the instructor's help. Now it's time to go ahead and show you a demonstration. Our next piece of equipment is the radial arm saw, as seen here with these two machines. The radial arm saw can be used to rip or cross-cut wood and or create dado cuts. Keep in mind when using the machines, it is a must to wear safety glasses and or a face shield. Before using the machine, obtain the instructor's permission to make sure everything is set up correctly. This radial arm here is used to create dado cuts. It has 5 blades, which creates a large path which will be cut into your wood. The overall goal of the dado cut is to allow for your project to be more sturdy and strong.
Okay.
To set up for the dado cut, make sure the blades are perpendicular to your piece of wood. To raise and lower the machine, you can use this lever here to go up and down. Before actually cutting your official piece of wood, it is a good idea to use a scrap piece of wood to see how deep the dado cut will be. Now that you have an understanding how to create dado cuts on this machine, let's go over here and talk about how to create a cross cut and a rip cut. Keep in mind, if pieces are less than 10 inches in length, it is not recommended to use on the radial arm saw. Before reusing the radial arm saw, make sure all safety guards and components are in place. Although this machine can be used to rip pieces of wood, it is recommended to only be used for cross-cutting. As compared to this machine, which is used for dado cuts, the blade on this one should not be raised and lowered, as it is used to cut completely through your piece of wood. Now I'm going to show you how to use the saw. Before you start, make sure the machine is on and running at full speed. Once the machine is running at full speed, make sure one hand is securely holding your piece of wood, the other hand is here on the handle. As you pull the blade through the wood, slowly but not fast, make sure the blade goes completely past the piece of wood to make sure that it is fully cut. Then allow the machine to rest in its own position and then stop. Our final piece of equipment here is the disc and the belt sander. Here we have the belt sander, and here we have is the disc sander. Before using the machine, you must wear safety glasses and or a face shield at all times. Also, short sleeve shirts or tightly fitted long sleeve shirts is highly recommended, as it could get caught into the machine. Before you begin using the belt sander, make sure your tabletop is secure. You can do so by loosening and tightening the lever here. Once you have it ready, it is good to go with using the belt sander. Before we get started with the operation of the belt sander, the on and off switch is located here. Remember, it's important to locate the off switch in case of an emergency. Now that we're ready to go with the belt sander, be sure the machine is running at full speed. Taking your piece of wood that is needed to be sanded, you will gently rest the wood against the belt sander and run back and forth, creating a nice even sand across your piece of wood. By running back and forth against the belt sander, it will prevent burning of your piece of wood and buildup of material on the sander itself. Occasionally, material may be built up on your sanding belt. You will want to use a sanding block, which is a rubber-like material, to remove those particles. When the machine is on at full speed, you will use your sanding block just as it was just as it is like a piece of wood, running back and forth until all of the material is removed. A few more tips. When using the belt sander, your piece of wood must be rested against the table. Finally, when using the belt sander, be sure to keep your fingers away as you're moving the piece back and forth. Once you're finished, turn the machine off and wait for it to come to a complete stop. When using the disc part of this sander, you must only use the left side of the disc. The disc is rotating in a counterclockwise direction. If you were to place your piece of wood on this side, it'll have a tendency to want to keep kicking up. So, when using the disc sander, use the left side of the disc.